Well, howdy, folks. You're back with another episode of Follow the Leader. I am your host, Lee Larson, and I am here with Helena Lovick.
Hello,
Thank you for joining
everybody.
us.
Hi.
Thank you. She has her PhD and is the current vice chair of the Cascade County Democrats and a former state legislative candidate. Thank you for being willing to run. Helena is also a co-founder of the community service group Wildly United and of the progressive What the Funk 406 blog. You're a wife, a mother, and a longtime Great Falls resident. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lee. I really appreciate the chance to talk about what we're doing in Great Falls and the Cascade County area.
Well, I appreciate you running for office. Now you are in a leadership position, as mentioned, with the Cascade County Democrats. Um, what is the general landscape of politics in like what is going on? Talk to us.
Oh, well, there's kind of as we all know in the country, there's a polarization that's happening between the Montana Republicans and the Montana Democrats. And there's also division within each party on its own, because you've got in Montana thousands of people that are kind of going to have different opinions about what they should do. And it's interesting to see lately in the last few years how national politics have really started impacting local races. That wasn't really always something in the past. Like people understood. Like they knew their neighbors more, maybe they were one-on-one and saw people in person, and so they understood that people are diverse and that you can't paint all politicians with the same brush. But what I've seen in the last few cycles is in particular that I've been involved in the local party has been this sort of we're all the same on either party, and that we're they would just say the rhetoric that's happening nationwide. And I think some of that too comes from the rise of social media and how easy it is to spread these partisan talking points. So it's really changed how voters' behavior is in our state. For example, we used to have a lot more split ticket voting, so people would vote for the person, not necessarily the party on their ballot. And we've seen less and less and less of that every year. And so it's just been more of voting the straight party line. That's been a change in behavior that is actually pretty unwelcome if you think about it, because um, you would want people to consider the person that's going to carry out what they think's best for our community, not just the letter beside their name.
Right. And you talk about how on both sides there's this sort of understand it's and those sides are dividing into camps. Can you talk about that? What is going on the left or the progressive or the blue or whatever this side is called, like the Democrat side is calling itself?
Yeah, I would say in the Democratic Party, some of the division is between more centrist, kind of center Democrats who are usually more traditional in how they think things should be run based on what's happened and been successful in the past. And then the more progressive, further left wing of the party that wants us to be more activist, acting on certain issues, like more outspoken on abortion rights, more outspoken on LGBTQ rights. And so people disagree with each other about how you should campaign, and also even what type of candidates we should try to recruit to run at all. They want candidates that for the centrist Democrats, it's more of a candidate that's been proven, like we want a long multi-generation Montana, and we want them to have lots of roots in their community and be preferably in a cowboy hat. And then there's this progressive wing that says we want a person that is outspoken and is not afraid to say controversial opinions, but that we all agree with. And so that's been impacting how people support candidates. I would say there's still unity in that most Democrats will still vote for a candidate if they think that candidate aligns with them politically, even if they're like, I don't like how you're running that campaign, but they'll still probably vote for them. So that even though there's division, I do think we agree on our party platform in many ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that because it seems to be dividing everywhere. Everyone is running and it's happening like you said, slowly but quickly, and folks are kind of waking up and being like, "Okay, so where am I on the left?" And not knowing what they're called. Are they called a liberal? Are they called a Democrat? Are they called a Marxist or a socialist? Democrat, socialist. There are so many things that are going on, um, and to hear that the Demo I mean, so with this year's elections, you've got a whole bunch of people, at least from Cascade, that are representing a ton of different views. How do you feel like, not necessarily about these candidates, but particularly looking at the Republican Party? Is the Republican Party of Montana has got as many different groups going on?
Oh yeah, the Republican Party has a lot is actually fighting even more than the Democratic Party. I'm not sure how much it's showing up in the news, but there is a faction called, the extreme MAGA, more very right, far right. And then you have the more moderate Republicans. You probably heard of the Solutions Caucus and the Montana House, where it's like Republicans that sometimes work in a more bipartisan manner. And then there was the Senate, the nasty nine, I guess Republicans were calling them, that were willing to vote in a bipartisan manner. And they are stripping the delegates of their rights to vote at the convention, their state party convention, that dictates the rules of their party. And they are writing nasty op-eds about each other. I would say there's actually interestingly more infighting there. And however, there's more energy in a lot of ways, at least in Cascade County, because Republicans in our county also have this wings that I'm talking about, the moderates versus the MAGA, and they're primarying each other to have control over their central committee, which is the local county party. And so we're in the Democratic side in Cascade County, we don't have nearly as much of this primarying, like challenging each other on both sides. And so I would say actually they're more strongly active in disagreeing with each other about which way they want the party to go. Their party. I don't think they're not they don't want us to go anywhere, the Democrats. So
Well, and you said that, as mentioned, you have your PhD and you've ran for legislative office. When and tell me about that campaign.
for the Montana House of Representatives in 2020, during coronavirus, a lot of that was a very unusual campaign in that we didn't knock any doors. I just remember I called all the voters. And a lot of what was interesting at that time was when a lot of the national politics, people were really mad about the quarantines and the pressures of the virus. If you remember, that was during the very big outpush of rallies around Black Lives Matter because of the murder of George Floyd. And people were really fired up on both sides. And what we saw in Cascade County was not a single Democrat that ran opposed to a Republican, not a single Democrat won. It was complete, utter wiping of the board by Republicans because in our county, we have a slight majority of Republican voters, at least we did in 2020. And that when I spoke to voters, I remember a lot of people would tell me they would never vote for a Democrat ever again, based on, I guess, their anger over restrictions around coronavirus, although that was the Trump administration. And then also maybe their anger about the division in our country and the rhetoric around Black Lives Matter. I'm not actually 100% sure why they were so angry at Democrats when we weren't the ones in power, but that was very clear that they were. And I heard that from multiple people. I wasn't the only one that heard that type of language.
Yeah. And that's and historically, I mean, Montana has been red and blue. It's been purple. Like you said, it was not a single party voter. It was through the ballot, through individual policies. And that anytime you start to and I see this at the national level, how
Mhm.
many Democrats, or people were upset with them this morning because they voted in favor of funding or not abolishing ICE, but, like, also that bill was part of another larger bill that they now later down the line, it'll be like, "Oh, but you voted yes or no for that thing," and it's just when you bag everything together, it makes it hard for us as the voter to figure out what's going on, um, and I would hope that Montana I know that's how we get a lot of things done, and I just hope that that process continues. Um,
Yeah, I would say we've seen obviously in the last few cycles, it was a very much rightward swing in our state, and in our country in the last, national general election. There was a rightward swing during the, 2024 presidential campaign. And, uh, and that's why in Cascade County, we actually hadn't won a legislative district for like 6 years, and then, this last cycle, after redistricting, we won 1 legislative seat for Jane Weber, in the heart of Great Falls, and so there is a more favorable map for Democrats now after the redistricting based on population movement during the last census. And that will help us break the supermajority, which we did break the supermajority of Republicans in our legislature in the last legislative cycle. There's still a Republican majority, and there likely will still be one after this next and this election cycle this year. But I do expect to see us pick up more Democratic seats because of the impacts of national politics with what you said about people are hearing a lot more of, like, on their social media, you get to hear more, like, opinions on different social issues, and I think that's driving some of this, change maybe of sentiment in our state. Although I do expect Cascade County to continue to be more conservative than it was in, say, the '90s or something.
well, and then that's a good question. As you see that the future is still gonna remain conservative, what how does that then play back, to those kind of conversations you're having amongst Cascade Democrats? I mean, if it's that red, do you run a moderate, or do you just say, "Hey, we need a total answer, opposite answer to how" so what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that is actually the heart of the division, like I was saying, in our party of what type of candidate to run. And what I think also it's the question of what is your candidacy for? Most people, of course, think every candidacy should be for, well, you're trying to win. But in a lot of seats, even in our county, I would not expect a Democrat to win, at least not this next cycle, because of just the con ratio of Republican voters in those districts. And so then if you're a candidate and you can't win, um, you could push people on issues that you care about and be a outspoken advocate for things that would help improve all of our lives. I know that we can speak out on clean energy, for example, and point to unfairness around the taxes that Calumet, the refinery in Great Falls, enjoys that is impacting and polluting Montana. And so that kind of outspeak with a person who has a bigger platform as a candidate can then elevate the issue. And so more people learn about it. And so even though you're not necessarily going to win your race, you can have a role in impacting politics. And maybe the next time someone runs, either the right, the Republican might move toward you on that issue because public sentiment will hopefully move with you. Or you can start converting people's opinions later and building a coalition that will get you elected in the future. So that's where I think progressives, voices that are saying we should be more outspoken, I do think some of our candidates ideally would be very outspoken as long as, if you're declaring as a Democratic candidate, and this is true for any political party, you're kind of, you're committing to upholding the party platform. And if you do differentiate from the party platform, you should be very clear with the voters so they're informed. like such as pro-life Democrats. Our party platform for Montana Democrats, and I'm sure it's the same for the national party, is that we believe in choice for women and their and people that can become pregnant, that they have choice in their reproductive health care. And that's something that I think if we can be more outspoken, it helps every race. There is a consultant class that kind of thinks that we should, they kind of have a dream candidate that can somehow thread that magic needle between being just enough outspoken, but not too much to worry the middle so they can get elected. And I think that that tightrope walking can sometimes be done. It's very challenging, but I think the best way for us to go forward and build a bench in a blue Montana in the future would be to continue to have outspoken candidates that help move public sentiment. And then your candidates don't have to be reaching to the middle. The middle's already with them because our party platform, in my opinion, the Democratic Party platform is extremely popular when the voters understand exactly what the Democrat is standing for.
Yes, and that's a good point, and like you said, because so many people, they don't.
Right.
Like, it's there's just, like, and then you see, on a national level, Democrats doing things that are more or less, people are happy with, people are not happy with, and then how does that translate here? And, um and it's hard to watch this administration just steamroll and hold folks hostage. I was recently reading, how was it Lauren Boebert over in, Colorado, like, withholding water funds, because she questioned his Venezuela, and, like, that's not that's not even party anymore,
Right.
um
Yeah.
it's scary. Um, talk to me, a week or 2 ago, there was something in the news, about John Tester, Seth Bodnar, different a covert group. There were just rumors and murmurs. Talk about that. Clarify for the audience what happened there or what you know.
Yes. So there was a private message that former U.S. Senator John Tester wrote. He hasn't publicly confirmed it's him, but he also hasn't denied it. And so I think it's pretty clear to us that it is his message and he wrote it. And in that long private message, John talked about how the Democratic Party has been a poison and an anvil to his campaigns. And then he also went on to say that the University of Montana president, he just resigned this week, but he was at the time the president, Seth Bodnar, was interested in running for U.S. Senate, and that John praised Seth, but he mentioned that he's crazy to run and that internal polling showed that a Democrat won't win, but independent gets an 8-point swing. A generic independent in that race would get an 8-point swing. And so then the consultants and other people, I guess, have been talking about pressuring Seth Bodnar, not pressuring him, but encouraging him if he's going to run as an independent because they think that threads the needle. The problem with that position is that we already have Democrats that have declared in the U.S. Senate race. And if you are trying to thread the middle with an independent candidate, we know that almost with complete certainty that that candidate will not win and they will only pool votes from the Democrat. We know that because we have an example of what that did, and I believe it was in 2022. There was an independent from Billings, Gary Buchanan, who ran for the U.S. House. We had a Democrat in that race. Her name was Penny Ronning, and they were running against, I believe it was Matt Rosendale. And Buchanan did take votes from Penny. It was very clear that he took votes from the Democratic candidate, and neither one of them won, and Rosendale ran away with that election. And I know that was in the House seat, the Eastern Montana, the, but it wasn't. Actually, that was the whole state that year. So that was before we got 2 congressional districts. And so I don't see any way that he is going to do anything if he runs as an independent, which he almost certainly will, that won't damage the Democrat fraction of the vote. However, I will say he resigned. Seth Bodnar, the one that Tester wrote about in his message, did resign this week. And so we're kind of waiting and looking to see when he's going to announce. I'm sure it's going to be as an independent for the U.S. Senate. But I would say it's interesting to see this. What it will do to the Republicans because they're already putting out negative attack ads against him. So I think maybe there might be some interesting internal polling that would make it worth their while to put any money at all into our U.S. Senate race when the major players all think it's out. It can't be won by a Democrat this cycle. And so maybe they're worried too. And so that's interesting to see what will happen in that race. I don't, as a Democrat, want Seth Bodnar to declare as an independent. I think he should declare as a Democrat. And I think part of your job as a party leader is to understand the party is the people. There's no magic institution that is the party. I am the Democratic Party, and if I want it to change, then I have to put in the effort to make it better. And if you run away from the party, as Tester did in his last 2 elections, as he said he did, then that only hurts the party. You say it's an anvil, but you made it so by not strengthening it and making it a actual benefit to you, because the party is a tool. And whatever it is, we can make it what we want it to be if we put the effort in. So that's where a lot of Democrats right now, I've heard a lot of people are pretty pissed off about the Seth Bodnar message from Tester because I knocked probably hundreds, no, probably 1,000 doors for Senator Tester in his last 2 elections. And so I'm not happy with him that he would throw us, such harmful, like under the bus. And then I could also talk to you, Lee, that he also made some pretty unflattering comments about the Democrat, that's one of the Democrats that's in that race, which is also just um, a complete misreading of the progressive wing of the party is what I think on that. So I think you kind of brought up Riley Neal. I think you did, but maybe before we started our chat today. But um, she's one of the people running for U.S. Senate that's a Democrat. And John Tester said, we can watch her talk about trans rights, democracy, and bathrooms, by the way, but she'll lose by 25, but she is a Democrat. And that's pretty shitty thing to say because Riley is being the more progressive wing by not backing down from uncomfortable topics that we have to stand up for if we want to shift public opinion on them.
I'm sorry to hear that. I haven't been engaged too much in the Montana specific politics, and I'm sorry to hear that. And thank you for sharing with us all
Mhm.
of your knowledge and explaining us those texts and why you feel so strongly. In his aversion to the Democrat, I mean, was there something that has happened? Like, have you seen this for a while? Um, you said in his last 2 terms it was an anvil. Did he start voting differently? What did that look like? How did he respond?
I think the biggest thing we saw where he was sort of running away from the party, I can give some examples. In his last election campaign in 2024, several of John Tester's campaign ads basically said he'd stand up to anybody, including Biden. Biden was your Democratic president. So that tells me he was distancing himself from the party. He also implied that, he voted for what, with what I think he said he voted with Trump on certain issues. And then he brought up some xenophobic language around China, which again was a split from where the Democratic Party is leaning. And so I think that was pretty clear. He was trying to thread that needle that consultants and his political campaign staff probably suggested was the only way to win a race in our state. And John Tester won re-election multiple times before that. I have never ran for U.S. Senate, so I will give a caveat that maybe he knows more than me about what it takes to win a U.S. Senate race. But I know people, and I do think local politicians, unlike national politicians, which is what Senator Tester became, we're closer to the people because we live in the community with them. We speak to them every day. They're our neighbors. We're closer to the pain because we're not separated by the haze, I think, of what happens in DC, which I really do appreciate our politicians being willing to run. It is extremely difficult. I have a little bit of experience with that, but I think a national campaign like John Tester had to run for the state, to be elected is extremely difficult and challenging. And so I do think that, he distanced himself from the party because he thought that that was the way he had to be. But in my opinion, I think that that was doomed eventually, and that's what we saw. Eventually, it did him in because if you're going to be a Democrat and start engage in the party and being like, hey, I want us to talk about this issue. I want us to be more outspoken on veterans' rights or whatever your issues are. And that leadership would have impacted how our state party, for sure, and probably our national party, even some of the rhetoric they would have given out because they wanted him to win. So it's not, make it a tool rather than, something negative for you.
Um, with that being said, I heard rumblings that there is a Democrat socialist group movement starting. We saw this in New York. I'm sure that's something that we could expect out of Missoula. Have you seen any larger presence? Is that something that is a concern to the Democrat Party?
I have heard some rumors about the Democratic Socialist movement. And I think in Montana, it hasn't really had any headway. So I'm not too concerned how it will impact our local party. Maybe in some of the more liberal cities, that might be something that they have to consider. Like, in the Working People's Party in New York City, Mondami getting elected as mayor, and he was also as the Democrat candidate. I think that might end up being some sort of framework for how that we could work together. My understanding, at least for the progressive branch of the Democratic Party, there's a lot of alignment with the Democratic Socialist movement. And so that'd be interesting to see if I think they would still be swallowed into our party, at least for now in Montana.
Thank you, because again, before I was like, "What's going on?" So yeah, and then the other thing is that when you think about party donations and what that looks like, um, yeah, it's just quite a bit. Um, some other things that people have questions about. It is winter in Montana, but have you heard anything about ice in Montana or the status of immigration in Montana? What's going on with that?
Yes, ICE is definitely in Montana, very clearly so. We've had people in the Great Falls community that have been detained. And there's also been multiple people listed on the manifest for our county jail here, the county prison that's run by Sheriff Jesse Slaughter. And so we know that they're being detained and held, and they're usually very quickly moved somewhere else in the country. So we have trouble following some of that, but we know that they are active in our state. Um, it's been, I would say, less visible than obviously what we're hearing out of Minneapolis, but I know that some people have said that they've seen their neighbor be detained, and then there was a story in the paper about a young man who'd lived here for several years, and he had like a young family, and that he was being deported. Dakota, and I don't know his last name, but is his first name. I think Dakota Wheeler, maybe. But yeah, so there's a presence and a concern. And what I've been seeing in our community around that is there's been an increase in protest activity against ICE. There's been multiple protests. There was a bigger one on the 20th, Tuesday of January 20th. And that one, called it a walkout, and they marched and also protested on about 100 people. It was featured in the local news, or came out to kind of show the support for immigrants in our state and in the country.
Thank you. I know that I've seen that quite a bit. I know that there are folks that are getting growing concerned about protesting in light of what we saw. Renee Good, has that come up for you guys at all? Protesting and safety?
Yes. I've been protesting in our county for multiple issues, not every day, but like there's things that came up and we protested for. I remember during the Black Lives Matter rallies in the summer of 2020, there were multiple counter protesters that were there monitoring the protesters, holding their ARs and open carrying, and definitely trying to intimidate the protesters. And that was definitely uncomfortable. We had a local police presence. They were informed about what was happening, and they were kind of keeping an eye on it to keep us safe. But that's been most of our protests before that and after that have been pretty peaceful. There hasn't really been any counter protesters. The worst thing I usually see is people that might walk by and videotape us, and I guess for their social media or something. But in the last couple protests, the last couple weeks in January here, we've been seeing people are really angry, and I think it's because of misleading, misinformation, propaganda, to be honest, from the right that's making people angry about any kind of criticism of ICE. Maybe it's because they view ICE as a law enforcement branch in the same vein as Blue Lives Matter, that movement that sprang up in response to Black Lives Matter. I don't know, but we have had incidences where counter protesters like try to yank away flags from protesters, and a couple people got spit on and things like that. So I would say we've increased measures for safety. We've appointed people to de-escalate and attempt to intervene and take their temperature down when we have these types of incidents. We have safety monitors at the protests, and then we're just trying to keep the peace for now. Other than that, though, I would say it's very safe. I would say if people are going to protest, I would like people to educate themselves on de-escalation techniques. There is absolutely no benefit to arguing with a counter protester. It's not productive. You're not going to change your mind. And in many cases, that will enrage them and they might lash out. I've seen, I guess I forgot, there was another incident where I saw a counter protester try to punch somebody. They got arrested immediately. The police were there at that protest. But so that's where the violence could lead. And I see people pulling up very aggressively with their vehicles. And if we've seen throughout our country, vehicles driving into crowds, and or in Montana, a lot of Montanans own firearms, and we don't know if the person in that vehicle that's pulling up and acting aggressive has a firearm. It's really unsafe for us to engage. And so at all possible, protesters should just ignore it. And if they feel very unsafe, try to leave, call the police as a last resort. We don't want, that's an escalation sometimes too. But just be safe to protest another day.
Well, and thank you. That's something that as folks look for different ways to be supportive, they can go and protest. We know that they can call or write email to their local officials. What are some other ways that you're finding have been effective in bringing people together and passing legislation?
Well, number one is to get more Democrats elected. So the candidate filing period's coming up. So I would say consider running for office, or helping a candidate get elected to run for office. There's a lot of ways to do that. I hope people aren't intimidated by that, because honestly, when I ran, it's an honor to run. It's It's really a privilege to be able to do it, and you will feel such a connection with your community. So I hope people will consider that. Other things that have been beneficial is really just community and relationship building. So when you go to the protests, get to know your people, talk to the people around you, find out things they're doing. People are doing letter writing campaigns against Calaumet's pollution, or go to community informational meetings like one's about Northwestern Energy's energy planning for how they're going to, you know, cover our energy needs for the next decade or so, and speak up. These things might not seem like, oh, but right now I'm worried about ice, and I'm worried about it too. And but we can't let go of these other things too, because honestly, it all goes together. When we start standing up for the people, I think it benefits us all in many ways, and that's how you're going to get some of the more popular types of legislation through, like, ideally, universal health care, but lowering healthcare costs, how you're going to get our schools funded the way they should be so our kids have potential future, how you're going to get our kids fed so the kids don't go hungry in the state of Montana. And if you want all that to happen, it really takes engagement. And don't just engage by one time by writing a letter or going to one protest. Really, what it takes is sustained effort. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So go to the meetings. Keep showing up. That's like literally, I would say, show up. And you're like, that wasn't, it felt like a waste of my time, or that was boring. Show up anyway. Show up again. Keep showing up, and you will find your community. You will find your people. You'll find inspiration from them. And you'll find ways yourself that are things I couldn't imagine to get us, further along to more fairness and equity in our country, and hopefully hold on to our democracy in view of this type of authoritarianism that's been rising in our country.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And you bring up universal health care. Could that be a reality for Montanans? What does that look like? I'm not banking on the feds anytime soon, but what about in Montana?
I would say, unfortunately, no, until we get a Democrat majority again. I'm speaking for myself, not the local Democratic Party, but honestly, I can't imagine it not going any other way. The cost of healthcare is crazy. And with insurance fighting hospitals for reimbursement, it only actually damages our healthcare system. So, how can a doctor or a nurse or any healthcare professional want to go into a field that has such instability? And so then the services get thinner and thinner. We're seeing, rural hospitals close if they can't get Medicaid reimbursement. And that's impacting a lot of our local, like, healthcare, is that this erraticness from our current federal government is impacting their reimbursements, impacting who has health insurance, so that they can get healthcare. And we know it's actually cheaper to have universal health care. Other countries have found a way. And I would say this is slightly a tangent, but what is government for? It's to help the people. Otherwise, why even have it? Why pay taxes at all if it doesn't help us? And instead it attacks us, like we're seeing with the ICE response in Minneapolis and other places in our country. Government is meant to help the people. And so we should, if we want universal health care, honestly, the people need to be loud about it. I don't think you're going to get there without outspoken advocates talking about it, because, as I was mentioning earlier, we talked today, candidates have to thread this magic needle where they don't offend, people. They have to be very careful in their language. Activists can say whatever they want. And so if you want universal health care, which I think you're a fool if you don't. I then speak up about it. Talk about how ridiculous it is that we have to pay in and it's tied to our employment. That's just the stupidest thing ever. And so let's not let the lobbyists and the industry billionaires keep pushing us toward a future that's not sustainable, and get to that universal health care in some form or another. I do think you need Democrats to do it, and that's why I support Democrats. But that, I think, if we ever want that in Montana, I think that's the kind of push we need to have. And we can get there, because some states have done their version of Obamacare, was like in Massachusetts and so on. So I don't think it's impossible. I do think unfortunately, it's further off than I want. But, things can change fast when public sentiment changes, like it did on gay marriage. There's been a huge swing on that. People are in favor of it now. And so the majority. And so I do think we can move on this, issue.
Wow. Well, yeah, I've heard it a few times, and I've even heard, like, the healthcare system is just so bad. We need something, and something has to give. Um, so as we look ahead, we are sort of, like I said, in a civil Cold War. And then even amongst ourselves, there's been a lot of breakdown. Uh, how how are you taking care of yourself? How are you staying in the fight with so much fighting amongst yourselves, constant barrage of headlines, and then we've got and then on top of it, we've got this administration that pumps out hype videos about all of it. So, how are you taking care of yourself?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tough question, I think, Lee. I'm sure you know that we tend to burn ourselves out. I think it's an American American principle. Uh, but I think one of the things that lifts me up is tied to what I do, which is the people. Um, so when I'm feeling burnt out or discouraged, hanging out or doing something with other people that are as worried as I am or as passionate about an issue as I am, or more passionate, ideally, it makes me feel better. It makes me feel like I'm not alone. And so I do think that's one way to build up your mental health. I think all the other things are things that I do very poorly, but I would recommend, which is sleep, sufficient amount, eat healthy, I do get a little exercise. That's probably does it. And I think just, as best you can, try to limit your social media time because even if it's not fake news, even if it's not misinformation, it really is meant to kind of stir us up, and it's not really healthy for us to take in that much information all the time that's negative. I think that that's really almost paralyzing to people. And so, if you actually want to do more, it's not even just the time of doom scrolling. I think it's the mental depression that it brings. So, I really hope people can try to disengage from that feedback loop of all these negative stories. You don't have to know every negative thing that happens in this country. Know what you can, and then just take a breather and just say, I can't know every news bite that comes out. It's impossible, and just let it go. And that I think would be better for people's mental health too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me today. Can you talk and share a little bit of how folks can support you or the Cascade Democratic Party?
Yes. So the Cascade County Democratic Party, I'll say this a little bit about the infrastructure. So we have a state party and then we have county parties. Not every county in Montana has a party because it just doesn't maybe have a critical mass of people that want to run that local party. But we obviously do in Cascade County. There's enough people and enough Democrats here to run a local party. And ways you can get involved is we have monthly meetings. They're on the third Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. They're currently being held at the Great Falls Senior Center. That's at 1004 Central Avenue in Great Falls. And we do other events like monthly breakfast on the first Tuesday at the senior center. We have a new permanent office space if people want to stop by and learn more. That's at the Labor Temple. The Labor Temple is over at 1112 on 7th Street South, and we're in Suite 201. You could swing by between on any business day, 9 to 2, and say hi to someone staffing the office and kind of ask them things you can get involved. We have a Facebook page. Look up Cascade County Democrats. We have a website, cascadecountydemocrats.org. We have some other ways you can reach us, but if you check those out, then you'll kind of get looped in. You can get on our mailing list. And then we send out emails periodically about, hey, these things are happening, and reminding people about meetings and things. So that's a way people can get involved. And I would really encourage you, if you're in, you come to one event, like I said earlier, but I'm going to repeat it because it's worth repeating, and it's boring, and you didn't know anyone, you felt uncomfortable, keep going back anyway. Because I got involved, I didn't know anyone. I was just really concerned about our country. And, now I can do a lot and I can have a big role in our local party. And I get to sway which way my party, I get to have a position of power in my party in order to help what I think is help. And I think people agree with me because I've been reelected for my role and multiple times in the party. But to get people to get the party where we want it to be a more progressive, caring party, to be more effective. And so the ways that you can do that is by getting engaged.
Well, thank you, Helena. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing so much. I know that you've given us a lot to think about and really, folks, like I said, get involved. It doesn't have to be a protest necessarily. There are so many different ways. And honestly, just show up. If you see a problem, if you want to be a part of the solution, I mean, like you said, gotta be it. like,
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this before and other times I've spoken publicly about this, but I would say that a lot of times people think there's some kind of magical formula, if we can do everything just right, that will change things. And what really the way to change anything is just persistent effort. It's the fundamentals. Talk to people in person, one on one, or, talk to voters. Tell people about why you have a position you have. They may not seem glamorous and flashy to drop campaign mailers at people's houses, but literally, if we do all of that work, that's what builds to the bigger change sometimes. It's not always the big protest movements. Yes, they can have a big role and they're important, and I really want people to be engaged with them. But I would say if you feel like you can't contribute much, every little bit helps, and I mean, I sincerely mean that, even just physically being in the room helps. But there's other ways you can do things that if we all did them, the world would certainly be a better place, and our country would be in a better place. And so I encourage people to try and show up.
Thank you, Helena, for your service, for all that you're doing. Um, Thank you. I know that that is a headache and it's a thankless job, so I am thanking you.
Thank you.
and folks, you heard it here. If you are interested in learning more, check out Cascade County Democratic Party of Montana. I am your host, Lee Larson. Follow the leader. This was Helena Lovick of the Cascade County Democratic Party Vice Chair. Thank
Mhm.
you for being here.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks for
folks,
having
we'll
me.
see you later.
Bye,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Bye-bye. And